what did you think of the basketball scene?
I th-
I really the line that I really have an issue with is the fact that Flash, this like guy who you've said looks like he just came out of prison, is threatening this poor innocent girl who's just painting a poster. He says, like, she says, "Oh, you did that on purpose, Flash," and then he says back, "No, but I should have. You better watch your back." Like, what are you doing? Like, who wrote that? Hello, everyone, and welcome to a very special episode of the Rewatch podcast. I'm particularly happy to be here for this one. My name is Samuel,
And I'm Jayden.
and this is a podcast where we rewatch classic or current films and then decide whether they deserve a rewatch from you. Before we begin, a like on this video would be most appreciated. You can subscribe if you'd like. If you're tuning in on Spotify or another major podcast app, you can find us on YouTube by searching the Rewatch. So this week, Jayden, we watched The Amazing Spiderman.
Yeah. I sound so disappointed by that. No, I actually partly decided to watch this film and choose this film for this episode, so I can't really hate on the decision because it's been a while since I watched it, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to give it another chance.
Yes. Well, I appreciate it. Obviously, a major disclaimer on my behalf here. Obviously, you know, the people who watch this channel know that I like these movies quite a bit. The Amazing Spider-Man 2 is my favorite movie of all time, which is something that I have to live with. But
You have to live with
but it does mean that this movie, I'm a major fan of this movie too. This is one of my favorite superhero movies, obviously. And I'm interested to talk about it with you because you obviously you don't like The Amazing Spider-Man 2, and I respect that.
No.
I respect that. But this movie, it's sort of, you know, it gets hate, I think, because of the second film and because it came after the Raimi trilogy. So I'm really interested to, you know, hear what you have to say about it when you revisited it. Because how many times have you watched the film, do you think?
If I'm going to be completely honest with you, I don't actually know if I've watched this film all the way through. Like, I don't know if I've watched it on a streaming service or in the theaters before. I definitely haven't watched it in the theaters. But I don't know. I feel like I've only ever watched it on like clips on YouTube, but I have no idea because I was watching this film and a lot of this stuff was like really new to me, but that could have been because it was like so long ago. So I'm not actually sure.
Yeah, I completely missed this film when it came out. I wasn't into superhero films at this time. I wasn't really into movies. I think 2012, sort of like, you know, MCU was kind of starting to build a bit of momentum, but we still hadn't had the Avengers yet. Or maybe we would have it
I
very
think
soon.
Avengers was 2012, but
Yeah, so this is probably like, you know, when MCU was sort of, you know, starting to build a bit of momentum.
I think where the MCU really built its momentum is when it, you know, started branching out more and doing different stories with, you know, Guardians of the Galaxy.
For
I think
sure.
that's where it started to get really big, which I think was like 2014. I want to say.
Yeah, for
Oh,
sure.
it might
And I
have been
remember, like,
2015. Not sure.
as a little kid, I remember watching bits of, like, seeing bits of Raimi Spider-Man.
Yeah.
But I completely missed this one, and but I watched The Amazing Spider-Man 2 in theaters. But then I loved that movie for so long, but then I never watched the first one. It was like I must have watched the second one probably like 10 times before I watched the first one. It's just beyond me. Like I never even knew of that this movie existed.
And then you realized another one came out, and you're like, hell yeah!
Yeah. So I'm looking forward to hearing what you think because I hadn't seen this movie in the theaters or anything like that. I feel like this movie was sort of lost in time, really. So I'm looking forward to having a chat about it. But story overview, obviously, it's a Spider-Man origin story.
Yeah.
So we sort of know what's going to happen. So after Peter Parker is bitten by a genetically altered spider, he gains newfound spider-like powers and ventures out to save the city from the machinations of a mysterious reptilian foe. Um, Directed by Marc Webb. Now, you probably wouldn't know who Marc Webb is.
I feel like I've heard his name before, but
yeah, I've probably brought him up.
yeah, you probably have.
But yeah, he's only ever made one other film before this, and it was 500 Days of Summer, which is like a romantic comedy film
Oh, yeah.
with Arthur or Joseph Gordon-Levitt.
Really?
Gordon-Levitt, you know, you're the guy from like Inception and
Yeah.
Dark Knight Rises and stuff.
Robin.
And yeah, and it was like relatively well received. But before he did that, Marc Webb made music videos. So
Really?
which is something that you can definitely see he uses in this film. Because we essentially have a music video in this film on stage, don't we?
Yeah,
like,
yeah, we do.
Skateboarding. So yeah, it would be interesting to chat about that. But
I find
Marc
it so
Webb,
funny that his last name is Webb. Am I like
yes,
the
it
only
was
one
made
that
to
finds
be.
that funny?
It was made to be. Sony were just like going through their like list of like 100 directors, and they're like, Webb sounds good.
All of the
That's-
applications. Who do we choose? This guy's
Yeah.
called Webb.
Yeah, it's funny. All right, so let's go through a bit of the cast briefly. So obviously, the main man, Spider-Man, is Andrew Garfield in this instance. And do you want to give me like a brief opinion on his performance in the film?
Yeah, you're gonna start tearing up. I think Andrew's acting is phenomenal, to be honest. He is a really good actor, and
Cry of happiness. I was about to cry of depression. I thought you were gonna rip.
no, I really enjoyed his acting in this film, and I definitely think it was one of the highlights in this film. And I really want to watch more of his films because I haven't really watched any of his films. And
Yeah.
like you've said, you've mentioned Hacksaw Ridge, and you just sent me a post on Instagram with some other film of his which looked really good as well.
99 Homes. That's a great
99
film.
Homes, yeah.
Don't worry, I've got that on DVD.
You've got
You'll
it
be
on
watching
TV. You're
it
gonna
soon.
make me watch it, yeah. No, I think his acting in this was pretty top notch, and I do think that in particular he kind of makes his character so realistic that you can really reminisce with him. And in particular, all of his death scenes that he does, and even in the
Yeah.
Amazing Spider-Man 2, because that's more fresh in my mind. I think he deals with them really well, and it feels so real. He adds like this element of realness to it. But no, I do think that him and Emma Stone probably carried this film on their backs. Yeah.
Yes, Emma Stone as Gwen Stacy. I mean, and those two on screen together, I think some of the best scenes in this entire film were
definitely.
just when Andrew and Emma were on screen together,
Yeah.
Just talking, you know, just having dialogue. And obviously, I think they were dating when this film was in production. And obviously, they were dating in the second one as well. And everyone always, you know, harps on about how that produced good chemistry. And I don't really want to compare this movie to a lot of the other films, but I was watching Spider-Man 2, and there's hardly any chemistry between Tobey Maguire and Kirsten Dunst. I mean, I know they're supposed to love each other, but in this film, every time Andrew and Emma are on screen together, it's magical, in my opinion anyway. So Curt Connors is played by Rhys Ifans. I hadn't really known of his acting before.
Yeah.
Look, I think his performance is good until he becomes the Lizard, and then I don't think. Then he sort of had to go to like a who's Green Goblin?
Willem Dafoe.
Yeah. He sort of had to do an impression of that. Like he just had to do Insanity, and I don't know. I feel
Uh,
like his character got worse as it went along.
I didn't really like his character from the start,
Oh,
and
okay.
I think that's one of the issues I had with this film is that the villain and his whole backstory was just kind of bland, and it's I don't know. I feel like I've seen it before. Some scientist works with his dad, and then
Mm,
he's like the evil partner, and then he turns himself into some mad scientist lizard creature.
yeah,
Um,
science experiment gone wrong.
exactly, it's kind of like a Doctor Jekyll and what is it Mr. Doctor Jekyll and Mr. Hyde? I think that's what it is. Frankenstein esque sort of
Yeah, yeah,
backbone of the film, and I don't know. I didn't really find it all that interesting.
yeah.
And I feel like this is one thing that Sony really messed up on with the Amazing Spider-Man duology, is that their villains are just so boring and bland, and uh,
Agreed.
like in the second film as well. I mean, Electro is just a terrible character. I
Yeah,
don't
one of
even
the
know why
worst.
they're deciding on bringing him back.
Yeah,
And then I think what's his name? The Green Goblin, played by
Danger Han,
Dan DeHaan. I don't know. I didn't really like his performance either.
Mhm.
I've never really liked any of the performances by
The villain.
Green Goblin, but at least
Oh, okay.
Willem Dafoe's was kind of humorous.
Yeah,
But
I
no,
love
I
that.
didn't like Dane DeHaan's either. So I feel like
Mm,
Sony just keeps messing up with their villains. And
mm,
to make a good film, you essentially need a protagonist and antagonist that mesh together really well to create
for sure. Mm,
um, uh, this sort of chemistry, I guess you could say, on screen. Um, and I don't know, I feel like they just never perform on that, which is it's frustrating because this film is actually a really good idea for a film, and I think they could have executed it so much better if they just hadn't chosen the lizard as a character or just made it
mm,
somehow better. Because I don't know, that
yeah,
was
for
one of my
sure.
major flaws with the film.
There was a lot of scenes that were cut from this film, and quite a few of them were of the lizard. And
Mhm.
it was explained that he had a family, and there was a scene where he's talking to his son, and his son's like, "Dad, what's happened?" And he's this is after he becomes a lizard, but he's
Mhm.
back in a human form, and it sort of like fleshes out his character because in this, it looks like he's just a lonely man with a mansion. Um, but I really like, when he isn't the lizard, I like his character. He's sort of got this like quiet, but sort of like, if you pushed him, he could go over the edge.
Mhm.
But he seems like a nice man, and he's almost like a father figure for Peter in that first half of the film, at
You know
least.
what it's kind of
Um,
like? It's kind of like
mm,
Anakin in a way, right? So he starts off as like a good guy, right? And then
mm,
he gets like turned to the dark side and
mm,
becomes this evil lizard creature, and then
yeah,
towards the end he comes back to the light side.
yeah, yeah. Fair enough. Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Captain Stacy is probably one of my favorite side characters, played by Denis Leary. I think Captain Stacy was great. I really like his character because he's sort of like this confident, calm. Or he's very similar to Kurt Connors, as he's almost a father figure for Peter at one stage. And I love the scene at the dinner table that
Hmm.
we'll talk about a bit later on. But what did you think of Captain Stacy? Because I really enjoyed his character, and especially I think the promise at the end is the thing that sort of defines the duology here of stay away from my daughter.
Hmm.
That's sort of like the one, you know differentiating factor of the Amazing Spider-Man duology. So what did you think of Captain Stacy?
No, I actually really liked his performance as well. And I do think that a lot of the performances in this film were pretty good. The only real issue I had was obviously, like I said, with whatever his name is, the lizard actor. Um, but no, I did like his character, and I kind of liked how he played this arrogant sort of father figure who puts his job first,
Mm,
and he wants to take down the Spider-Man. I never really understood that because at the end, when the lizard is loose in the city, and that's probably the threat they should be focusing on. But they're focusing
Yeah.
on catching Spider-Man. Like I never really
Mm.
understood that. Um,
Mm.
but taking away all of that, I do think he played a pretty good performance, and I do think that he kind of um, he really felt like Gwen Stacy's dad. And even though Gwen Stacy, is probably a early 20s actor during this film, um, that's another flaw with the film. Why is everyone in the high
Yeah.
school like 30 years
Yeah.
old? Um,
Yeah.
I do think that he really nailed the sort of father figure um, really well. And, even though there's probably not that much of an age gap between them, he felt like that. Um,
Yeah.
and if you've ever seen The Fugitive, which is quite an old film, he kind of reminded me of Tommy Lee Jones's character. Um, Samuel Gerard, I think his name was, um, who also played a pretty good performance of trying to find this fugitive and hunt him down, and he's like
Mm.
he's stay on his tail the whole time. That kind of reminded me of that.
Yeah.
But no, I quite liked his character in this film.
Oh, cool. I think one of my standouts in terms of performance wise, I think is Martin Sheen as Uncle Ben.
Mm,
I think every scene Uncle Ben is in is brilliant. I really love. Well, we'll get into it when we talk a bit more specifically, but there are a lot of scenes where, and especially with Sally Field as Aunt May as well. Obviously, Sally Field's like an award-winning actress, so she's extremely talented. And when you have Uncle Ben and Aunt May and sort of like the banter, sort of like the old married couple banter between the two, and then the protective nature of Peter and Uncle Ben's sort of like this rough, blue collar worker who's trying to, be there for Peter, but Peter's, got his head in, things that are far more complicated than Uncle Ben could even understand. And I really liked Uncle Ben just
yeah.
as like a down to earth, like trying to do his best,
Hmm.
but ultimately, like Peter was always searching for like a scientist sort of, he was always searching for his father, But what did you think of Martin Sheen as Uncle Ben?
No, I think he also did a really good performance in this film, and I kind of liked how when um when Aunt May was like stressing out about Peter, and then Uncle Ben was kind of just like, okay, what's going on here? Let's figure this out. He's kind of like playing this kind of father figure, like I said,
Mm,
with with the captain, because obviously Peter Parker never really had a father.
yeah.
So yeah, I do think that he played a pretty good role, but you can't beat the original Uncle Ben. I mean, he's just so
Oh,
good
I
in his
think you
role.
can. I think
Oh,
you
whoa,
can.
whoa, whoa! You're making a very
I
big
think you
statement
can.
there.
We can touch this on a bit more later on because there's a obviously you get the great power with great responsibility line has
Hmm.
sort of been like manufactured and twisted to come out as something different but still meaning the same thing in this movie. So when we touch on that, we can sort of go into a bit more of that discussion because I think the performance here is more realistic and therefore I think it's better. Because I don't know, would your uncle ever sit you down and be like, with great power comes great responsibility? Like, I don't have powers. What do you like
Yeah, but
no one's Spider-Man, like, saying, you know, your father believed in doing good things, and if you could do good things, then you have the responsibility to do those things. That sounds a bit more like realistic to what someone would actually say, at least in my opinion
but
anyway.
he's not talking about power in the sense that he's a superhero. He's talking about power as in like empowerment and what you can do amongst the community. He's not talking about
Mhm.
like uh, you can fly now with your power becomes great responsibility. Um,
Yeah.
I don't know. I might be speaking on a nostalgic front, but I do
Yeah,
like
me too, probably, so it's okay.
I do really like his the original Ben Parker. I don't know. It's just something
Mm.
about his
Yeah,
character.
yeah.
He kind of brings this warm sort of you know performance. I
Mm.
can't. I don't want to speak nostalgically, but I
Yeah,
like
no,
his
that's good.
performance more. Yeah.
Yeah, 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 fair enough. And we touched on Sally Field a bit as Aunt May as well. I think she has quite a larger role in the second film, but I think she's really good in this as well. But yeah, I think Would you agree quickly? Yeah, just like Sally Field's performance is pretty darn good as well.
Yeah, it was really good. And honestly, like, um, I think every Aunt May character that we've seen, right, has um, a different aspect to it. So I don't want to compare them, but
They're like all different ages on the age scale.
right?
Like I don't understand how Aunt May in the Raimi films is so old because she's supposed to be an aunt. Like how because you think like Tobey Maguire, so his Peter Parker's his mum,
Hmm.
that's his mum's sister. Like how old was his mum? like like Aunt May looks like a grandma. Well, she is a grand. Like she's
Yeah, keep in
like
mind the Peter Parker in that film probably would have been 17,
he's supposed
18
to
years
yeah, he's
old.
supposed to be like 19, like
So
max
the aunt's
19.
probably about like meant to be like 40, 45 years old, but
Way
she
too
looks
old.
like 70 to 80 years old.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I never understood that.
Mm,
Um I feel like either Tom Holland's Aunt May is
mm.
probably more appropriate, or
Yeah, I agree.
even the Aunt May that we saw in this film was also
Mm.
more to age of what it should be.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. She's definitely Sally Field and Martin Sheen are definitely playing characters that I don't know. I think they're a bit older, like especially because we see Peter's parents at the start as well, and th- they're really old.
Mm,
Like Peter's supposed to be like 6 or 7 or something, like
yeah.
at that stage, and his
They
parents
can
must
never
be
get the
like,
goddamn aging right in these films.
I
It's
know,
always messed up. Always
I
mess it
know.
up. The high
The
school
only,
has like 30-year-olds in it, and the Aunt May is like 90 years old, and then Ben Park is like 90 years old, and then
yeah,
Peter
it's crazy.
Parker's like, God knows how old Peter Parker is. I think Emma Stone was like 17 in this film, and she's looking like
Oh
she's
no.
a Victoria's Secret model. So I'm out here stressing, man.
Uh, no, that's good. I think Tom Holland's Spider-Man is the only Spider-Man to actually sort of, you
Yeah,
know, get the ages like as good as they can be. I think
that's what I
obviously you
like
can't.
about that
Mm,
MCU sort of setup they've done there. Is they've got the aging
yeah,
right. They've figured it out finally. It's taken them
for sure.
like only 20 years.
Yeah, yeah, it took them a while to get there, but yeah, at least we're there now. So I want to touch on some general thoughts before we sort of, dive into some of the plot details. But pros for me, I think the visuals are great. I
Yeah.
think the acting is great. I think the music is great.
Hmm.
Um, and I think the story could use a little work, and the villain could also use a little work as well. Would you agree with those?
That's basically everything I was going to say as well. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I think to go back to the visuals, I think this movie looks absolutely fantastic. I watched it on 4K, and the suit looks so
I,
good,
th-
man. And
I think it's one of the best looking Spider Man films that we've seen. It's obviously just smashed Sam Raimi's trilogy out of the park. And to be fair,
yeah,
that was made early 2000s.
mm,
Um, and, it's competing with what we've seen in the MCU. I think the MCU brings a lot more CGI, but the Amazing Spider-Man duology kind of still uses CGI, but it does it really well that it makes it look like it's he's actually swinging through New York City, and
mm,
it's quite a dark film as well.
yeah.
But I think it kind of suited the undertone of the theme and all of that. Yeah,
Mm. I'm liking what you're saying here. This is good. Oh, I'm enjoying this. What did you think? Let's touch on the suit for a second before we sort of dive
yeah,
in. So this suit, when I first saw it, I was like, "Are you kidding me? Like that looks absolutely horrible."
yeah.
And I imagine that was what everyone's first impressions was as well. But then watching it, a couple times and really sort of appreciating it, they're doing something different. And I love the fact that, well, first off, they try to make it look a bit more realistic, but still it doesn't, like, it's not like no one can make that. Like no teenager can make that in his room. Like it doesn't work, but that's
Hmm.
okay. So, but how the suit is made and like the colors of it and also what are your thoughts on the eyes? I think the eyes are a bit weird.
Yeah. obviously, he gets his eyes from sunglass lenses.
Mm.
Um, and I'm gonna be honest here. I never really liked the suit in this film, and I think it's probably one of my least favorite suits from any Spider-Man uh, franchise that we've seen. I really like the
Mm.
second suit in the Amazing Spider-Man 2, but I'm not the biggest fan of this suit, and it's kind of because I think it's comic accurate, right? It's kind of got the dark blue, the navy blue, which I actually think was meant to be black in Steve Ditko's and Stanley's drawings.
Oh,
So Spider Man was actually meant to be black and red, but anyway, I think this suit is more comic accurate, and in particular, I do think that Tom Holland suits were probably my favorite suits I've ever seen. I don't know, I kind of like the clean aesthetic of them and how the
okay.
lines kind of are integrated into the suit. I don't really like how the lines kind of stand out, like the webbing. I mean, the webbing on the
Yeah,
suits kind
okay.
of like extrudes from the suit. I've never really liked that.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
but yeah, I really like the second suit in the Amazing Spider-Man 2. I think that's a great suit.
Mm.
But I don't know. I'm not really a fan of this suit. Yeah.
Yeah, I really like the spider-like nature of it. You know, it's
Hmm.
watching it going from Blu-ray to 4K Blu-ray, you can really see the scales of the suit, and it's like really shiny. And like when he's on screen, the lizard, like it looks like they're both not human. Like it's it's got like this scaly sort of nature to it. It actually sort of it looks a bit like a spider in a sense. Certainly more than the Raimi films. Who just looks like a guy in a suit. This sort of more looks like a guy who actually has spider-like powers.
Hmm.
But I really like this suit at night. And obviously, most of this movie isn't set in the day. Sort of the only part where we see this suit in the day is when the high school fights on, like when the lizard comes to the high school.
Yeah.
Um, I think this suit works better at nighttime because I don't like the yellow eyes. I feel like they should have just made those black.
Yeah.
And I've seen edits where they've made the eyes white, and it looks so much better. But yes, because I don't know, but I like the suits at night, and obviously most of the film is at night anyway, so you can't really see the details of it. Um, and people said the suit looks like a basketball, and I see that point. I can understand where people are coming from with that sort of criticism. So, but without further ado, should we dive into a bit of the plot?
Yeah.
See what your thoughts about
Oh, I
some
just got up that
specific
image you were
points.
talking about with the white eyes. Oh my god, that looks so much better.
Yeah,
What
yeah,
were they
yeah.
thinking, man? Anyways,
Yeah,
let's move on.
and there was a concept suit. There was a suit before this that had like darker blues, like it was almost like a black sort of thing. But it looked worse, so I am happy that they changed it.
Okay.
But yeah, so we'll dive in. Big criticism of this film is that Peter Parker rides a skateboard. Did that bother you at all?
Not really. I mean, it kind of added to like his whole teenager personality, which even though Andrew Garfield was probably 25 years old in this film,
Yeah.
he really pulled off a teenager and his kind of awkward phase, and like he doesn't really interact well with girls, and he's really awkward around Gwen Stacy. I do
Yeah.
think he pulled that off really well, and kind of that nerdy aspect. In particular, I want to bring up this scene because I really like it,
Mm.
where he's making his suit, and he figures out the webbing right, and then he like the webbing like spans across like the room and hits like a wall,
Yeah.
and then he like puts his hand around the web. It looks really
Mm.
nerdy there, and I think
Yeah.
that was
Yeah.
quite a good scene. Yeah,
Yeah, he really does sort of embody that teenage spirit and that nerdy spirit.
yeah,
It does work, and I think it's also like I don't know. He looks so young in this, and then you compare it to the second film, which came out 2 years later, and you're like, is this guy like 10 years older than the one before? Like, it's night and day the difference. Like,
is it really?
I yeah, and I think it's I'm going to put it down to the fact that in this film he wears glasses for a bit of it, and then he also has a longer haircut, and
Okay.
that sort of makes his face smaller. Whereas in the second film, he looks like he's like 30 odd. Like he looks more like Andrew Garfield looks in real life. And what really messes with my brain is that he looks older in The Social Network, which came out 2 years before this film. And so they really try to, make him believable as a youngster.
Interesting.
For me anyway, it works. But if only they continue that with the second film, because he he looks like a good 10 years older in the next one, which we're supposed to believe like starts almost like a year later. The next one, the one before, or whatever. But Flash Thompson, another bit of a controversial part of the film. So obviously, the bully. He's a bit of an unrealistic bully, with the whole, grabbing someone and putting them upside down to eat their food, and just it's a bit cringe, isn't it?
I've never seen that happen in real life, right? You always hear of it, how I'm going to steal your lunch money and give you a wedgie, but does that happen? I don't want to sound I don't want to sound bad here, and if that does happen, I'm sorry for you, but I've never seen that happen. But in particular, I didn't mind his character actually. I didn't hate it, and I do think the point where he where Peter's just lost Uncle Ben,
Yes,
and
that's good.
Flash comes up to him and he's like, "Not today, Flash, not today," and then Flash comes up to him, and he puts him up against the locker, and he's like, "I'm sorry, man. I know how it feels." Man, that was really good. I really liked how they did that. Because we don't really see that from Flash a lot, and I think Tom Holland's Flash is a lot more childish, and
Oh, I hate that.
I don't really like his Flash, but this Flash, I don't mind it, and I don't really understand how people hate on it. You can hate on it for his unrealistic bullying.
He has some bad lines too. That's his
lines aren't that good. And he does look like he came out of prison like a month before this film started.
Fair enough. Yeah, but he does have a really nice arc. He realizes. I think his character's probably lost someone, and that's why he's sort of this powerful bully, because he likes to be in control and everything like that. Because that's what he says to Peter when Peter sort of lashes out at him.
Yeah.
And then obviously at the end we see, Flash and Peter are good friends, and he was cut out of the second film, but we saw him. There was a deleted scene of him.
That's a shame that they did that, because I think Flash is quite an important character to Peter Parker's whole backstory.
Yeah. Aunt May and Uncle Ben, I wrote, they're brilliant. I love when Uncle Ben comes out with his bowling trophies, and they're all like dusty, and he puts them on the kitchen table, and Aunt May's like, "What are you doing?"
Yeah.
He's like, these are my bowling trophies.
Yeah.
And she's like, "Oh, put them away, Ben." And he's like, "Oh, okay."
I like how the whole meatloaf scene.
Oh, that was hilarious. That was brilliant. That was brilliant. And I love when Uncle Ben says, "Yes or no? Do I have to call somebody's father?"
Yeah.
When Peter comes home with a black eye, because Ben sort of gets
He
it.
knows,
And I feel like if he was still alive when Peter was running around as Spider-Man, I feel like Uncle Ben would put it together straight away.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Like he just knows things. He's just got that. He's just wise, isn't he?
Yeah.
He's just a wise man. But and oh, by the way, Aunt May does. I reckon she does know that Peter's Spider-Man in this film. She's got to. It'd be pretty hard.
She has to.
Yeah. She definitely knows in the second film. Like it's almost like, it just annoys me because I just want confirmation.
He's washing the American flag.
Yes. Oh yes. Aunt May in the second film literally says we all have secrets, even from the ones that we love.
Yeah.
And she looks at Peter, and it's just. I need that confirmation. I need that closure.
I feel like everyone sort of knows that Peter's Spider-Man, and then Peter doesn't really know that everyone knows that he's Spider-Man.
Yeah. What did you think about Peter Parker's parents? That storyline, we get a bit of it. We get more in the sequel, but did that ever interest you? Like what happened to Peter's parents?
Nah.
Obviously, Yeah.
Nah, it's boring. I don't really care for
Yeah.
that.
Fair enough. Yeah.
That's all I have to say about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people would agree, though. I think, The Amazing Spider-Man was trying to tell the untold story, and the untold story was what happened to Peter's parents.
Yeah. But no one wants to see that, man. No one wants to see that.
Nobody really cares that much.
Nah.
I mean, yeah, but yeah. I mean, Martin Sheen's he's fantastic, and I really love when Peter says to him, "You're a pretty great dad, all right?"
Mm.
And we see like Uncle Ben. He sort of has like, he's sort of like one of those males that probably doesn't like want to show their emotions too much.
Mm-hmm.
He's sort of like a cards close to his chest kind of man.
Yeah.
But then like you can sort of see like he sort of has like a little smile there.
Yeah.
And it's really wholesome. I don't know if you picked up on that, but
No, I didn't see that, but
yeah, so he says it, and Uncle Ben sort of has like he's sort of like chuffed to hear it, but he's sort of like trying to hide it. But yeah, really, really nice. And obviously it just makes his death so much more tragic. But yeah, 'cause I think that's a really good scene as well. I want to bring up the fact that Spider-Man uses Bing, and that's just not acceptable.
Spider-Man uses Bing what? Does he?
He uses Bing at least like 5 times in this film. He gets on his computer and he searches up things like, spider bite and,
We need to talk about Peter Parker's home screen. This guy's a creep. What?
No, that wasn't his home screen. He just had the photo up.
He's still a creep.
He takes photos of Gwen Stacy when she doesn't, no, that's a breach of privacy, isn't it?
That's just weird, man.
It is a bit weird.
Yeah.
I love the scene where Gwen's like, "Oh, you didn't have me on your computer," and Peter's like, "Oh, well, I was like touching up stuff."
Yeah.
And she's like, "You were touching up stuff?" And he's like, "I'm not going to answer that."
Yeah.
It's like, ugh.
Smart move, Peter. Smart move.
Yeah, smart move. No comment. Exercise your right to remain silent, my friend. Anything you wanted to add before Peter sort of got to Oscorp and got the spider bite and everything like that? As I wrote, like, poor Rodrigo Cuvero. Am I right?
Who's Rodrigo Cuvero?
The intern that gets thrown out because Peter sells his name bad.
Yeah, that was kind of funny. Yeah, I do like how they carried that through. Like they didn't have to do that, but they did it. Keep in mind they cut out like lizard scenes for Rodrigo getting thrown out.
That's Sony's fault. That's the production's fault.
Is the is the basketball scene? Is that before they moved?
After he
that's
gets
after.
powers.
Okay, yeah. I have like one thing.
Okay.
Curtis Connors, right?
Yeah.
Or Curt Connors, whatever his name is. Peter Parker. Octo Octavius.
Alliteration.
Why? Why do they keep doing it?
Green Goblin.
Like, why? It's just weird because then like if you're watching a superhero film and someone's name alliterates, they've got something to do with the film.
Yeah, I guess sort of Harry Osborn and Norman Osborn are exceptions, but then they become Green Goblin.
Exactly, right? Dane DeHaan. I guess that's the actual actor there.
Yeah. Electro. They've still got 2 parts to it.
Yeah, I don't understand why they keep doing it. Although, it is comic accurate, so I can't hate on it. I just don't agree with it.
I don't like it, but I accept it.
Yeah. I have standards.
Yes, fair enough. I love when I just love every single piece of dialogue between Gwen Stacy and Peter Parker in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
One of the great pieces of dialogue is when Peter Parker reveals himself in the intern group, and Gwen sort of introduces him to Curtis Connors as second in his class, and Peter's like, "Are you sure about that?" And she's like, "Yep." Illustrating that Gwen Stacy's smarter than Peter Parker.
Yeah.
You know what? I'm all here for that. I think Gwen Stacy's actually a pretty badass character in this. Do you agree?
Yeah, I think it's kind of interesting how they. I think it's kind of interesting how they made her character kind of work at Oscorp, because keep in mind she is 17 years old and she is working at this probably $1 billion
Yeah,
industry. As she said, she's one of the senior members of it. She's 17
yeah.
years old and she's working at
I think
essentially
she said
the
senior
Apple.
intern, but still, yeah.
Like what?
She must be pretty smart.
I don't understand that. Once again, I
Yeah.
don't agree with it, but I'm gonna let it pass.
Except,
Yeah.
yeah, no, fair enough. Yeah, that was a bit weird. She works there in the second film as well, but yeah, obviously very smart, and I like the fact that she's sort of woven into the plot of this film.
Mm-hmm.
She sort of has quite a bit to do. The plot wouldn't work without her. She's not sort of like, the damsel in distress, which
Yeah.
we see with the Raimi films, which it's just.
Although we do
But,
see it in the second film.
Yeah, but I feel like, that's like Gwen Stacy deciding to, like, it's a big thing, it's her saying, I'm deciding to put myself in danger,
Mm-hmm.
it's my choice or whatever, feminism and all that good stuff.
Yeah, I
But
see
yeah,
what you're saying there. Kirsten Dunst's character is, always trying to be saved by Spider-Man, and then yeah, I kind of get the connection you're making there.
yeah, it's always like, villain rocks up, sees the girlfriend, and like, oh, I know how I'll get to you, Spider-Man. I'll kill the girlfriend. Whereas, like, sure, that's exactly what happens in the Amazing Spider-Man 2, but I feel like it has a bit more depth
Yeah.
because, like, essentially the entire film is and even this film is sort of, foreshadowing the inevitable.
She decided to put herself in harm's way, essentially. So yeah,
Yeah. And she does that in this film too, but she gets out. She's quite smart.
exactly. Yeah.
I love this scene where obviously you've touched on the meatloaf scene, and that's brilliant, isn't it? I love that. It's like, why didn't you tell me you didn't like my meatloaf?
And I like how
You could
it's
have
like
said that to me 30 years ago.
the scene's kind of wrapping up, and then you kind of hear it in the background.
Yeah,
I think it's
really
quite
good.
clever, yeah.
I really love, that homey vibe between, with
It feels like an
Peter.
actual married couple, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it feels real, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And that's one of the major positives I think for this film is that, watching the Raimi films, it's all bright, it's all cheesy. Like, none of this is real. Like, no, it's just completely unrealistic. You have like Power Ranger suits, Green Goblin dressed up as a Green Power Ranger, and just like wacky things happening. Whereas this one, sure, there's a CGI lizard trying to turn everybody else into a lizard, but
Yeah.
it's grounded in those character relationships of Uncle Ben and Aunt May and Peter and Gwen, all those things, and
Yeah.
Curt Connors and Captain Stacy and everything like that. I've touched on Curt Connors already. I think I like his character before he actually becomes a lizard,
Mm-hmm.
and then he loses me.
Yeah.
Definitely something that drags his film down.
Yeah.
the villain.
100%. Yeah.
And yeah, we've touched on the fact that Peter's trying so hard to find a father figure in this film, and he finds Connors first. Well, actually, he sort of like rejects Ben, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Because Ben's, Uncle Ben is his natural father figure, but Peter's always, he's trying to find something better,
Yeah.
right? And that's a bit, maybe he should have just stuck with what he had in front of him. There's a bit of a moral of the story there, but he goes and tries to find Curt Connors because Curt Connors knew his father, and then he tries to find Captain Stacy, and then all of this tragedy strikes.
Yeah.
There's so much bad stuff that happens to this character. And I was watching Spider-Man 2, and it's the same thing in Spider-Man 2. Lots of things are going wrong in that film.
Mm-hmm.
But in that film, it's like absolutely everything is going wrong. Like, Peter will go to grab a drink, and then somebody else will take the drink off him. And like, he just can't catch a break in Spider-Man 2.
Mm.
Whereas in this film, like, really bad stuff is happening to this character, man. Like, it's like tragedy after tragedy. And then I think of, like, at the end of The Amazing Spider-Man 2, I think Peter would have taken everything back and been like, oh, I won't be Spider-Man, thanks. I'll just have a normal life.
Yeah.
It sort of displayed the fact that being Spider-Man can actually be a bad thing. um,
Yeah,
which
I think
really
being a
makes sense to me.
superhero has consequences, right? And
Mm,
obviously, Captain Stacy talks on that. How he says, "Keep Emma Stone out of, not Emma Stone, keep keep Gwen out of it," because
yeah.
once you reveal yourself to your villains, right,
Mm,
they have a weak point because they know who your closest friends and family are, so they can
yeah.
get to you easily. So yeah, I do think that being a superhero is all happy and such. You can swing across the city when you're Spider-Man, but at the same
Mm,
time, you also risk um, the safety of the people you love.
mm, yeah, yeah, for sure. It definitely this series um, definitely displays the downsides of being a superhero.
It's a
But then it
dark
also,
series. It's
yeah,
very
but then
dark.
it also sort of, displays the good things. So obviously we all get the awesome web swinging shots, and how good would it be to swing through New York City?
Yeah.
And then at the end, you're like, oh my god, like so many people that he loves are dying. Like,
Mm.
but then he gets to swing through New York City and save people, and it's all happier. And it's like, oh, bit of a clash there.
Yeah.
What did you think of the basketball scene?
I f-
I really the line that I really have an issue with is the fact that Flash, this like guy who you've said looks like he just came out of prison, is threatening this poor innocent girl who's just painting a poster. He says, like, she says, "Oh, you did that on purpose, Flash," and then he says back, "No, but I should have. You better watch your back." Like, what are you doing? Like, who wrote who wrote that?
That's
Why
some
is
terrible
Flash?
writing.
Why is Flash intimidating this poor girl who's just innocently painting her post?
You
Like, it's
better
just
watch your back.
better watch your back. It seems like something out of like Greece or something. Like it's just
Yeah,
like
it,
why?
that's not too good, is it?
No. What were your thoughts on that?
um, Minus Flash, right? I do like the scene where he's holding out the basketball and he's like, "Come and get it, Flash!
Mm,
Come and get it!" And then Flash, they have that whole interaction where he can't get the ball off Peter Parker.
yeah.
Um, and then Peter Parker, goes for a slam dunk, like an
Yeah.
ultimate slam dunk, and the
Exactly.
backboard like shatters. Um,
Mm.
I never really understood that. Like, why would it shatter? I mean,
I guess he just like pulled on it with such force that
yeah,
it just shattered
yeah,
the glass or
that
something.
might have been it. But no, I do
Yeah.
think the scene was kind of funny, and how they tried to put more Flash into the film, and
Mm.
Peter Parker actually living his teenage life. I
Yeah.
feel like we got that a lot in this film, which was good because
Mm.
you need the superhero stuff, but you also need Peter Parker progressing as a character, which I think is a recurring issue they have with the Spider-Man films. They either get Peter Parker right or they get Spider-Man right.
Mm.
And
Okay.
it's really hard to find a balance between them where you nail both aspects of the character. And
Mm.
and yeah, I definitely feel like Tobey Maguire didn't nail that too well. I feel like he's probably one of the best Spider-Man. Um, and then Andrew Garfield plays a really good Peter Parker as well. Um, and at the same time, Andrew Garfield also does like a really good Spider-Man, which I think is what they did really good in this film. They found that balance,
Mm.
and then at the same time, I think they kind of learned from that, and then they made
Yeah.
Tom Holland Spider-Man, which has also done the whole um, finding the balance between Peter Parker and Spider-Man, and that might come
Mm.
along because Tom Holland's quite a young actor, and he can kind of pull off Peter Parker a bit easier because he's kind of got
Mm.
that age advantage with him. But in particular, I do feel like Andrew Garfield, even though he was really old, played that um, awkward teenager Spider-Man, Peter Parker,
Mm.
sort of two sides of his life. I think he did that quite well.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the fact that I sort of liken it to Batman Begins because this character doesn't like Peter Parker doesn't entirely actually become Spider-Man the character that we know and love until almost about three-quarters into this film.
Hmm.
Obviously we see the suit at maybe about halfway, which is quite a bit into the movie.
Yeah.
We've seen because we've gotten time, and you can see Marc Webb's priority was sort of, to get us attached to the man behind the mask. And that's sort of what we see with what Nolan does with Batman Begins. It's more of a Bruce Wayne film instead of a Batman film. And I feel like this is more of a Peter Parker story instead of a Spider-Man story, whereas I feel like the second one is definitely a Spider-Man story. Like, definitely lots of villains and lots of wearing the suit and, Spider-Man this, Spider-Man that. Whereas this is like, showing us who Peter Parker is and the tragedy that he's gone through as a person,
Yeah.
and the choice that he needs to make. And then eventually he becomes the character that we know and love.
Yeah.
But it takes him a while to get there.
Another issue I had with this film is the runtime, right? I think it's like 2 hours and 16 minutes, which is a really, really long film. And it didn't really have to be that long. And now that you brought up that there was deleted scenes, quite a lot of deleted scenes, I think you were saying, this film could have been like originally 2.5 hours, which is just like crazy. I mean, they really didn't need it to be that long.
More than that.
Yeah, keep in mind, Endgame is like 2 hours and 40 minutes, so it's probably close to that. And the content in Endgame is like so much more than what they've got in this story. So it didn't have any place being that long. And I feel like that kind of detracted from the film a bit, because we didn't see the Spider-Man we wanted to see until, like you said, halfway into the film. But at the same time, they built on the Peter Parker character. I just think that they probably had a bit too much of the Lizard, that whole, backstory. I really didn't like that part of the film. I feel like they should have gone in a different direction there altogether.
Fair enough. All right. I think one of the best scenes in this entire film is when is straight after the basketball scene where Peter's talking to Uncle Ben, and Uncle Ben's sort of, teaching him that getting even isn't the right thing to do. Uncle Ben's like, well, I guess you must feel pretty good about yourself, huh? And he's sort of given Peter a bit of a lecture. And then Uncle Ben sees Gwen Stacy, and he's like, oh, she looks familiar. And then he sort of has a bit of a banter. He's sort of like, oh, he's got you on his computer. And Peter's like, oh, crap. Like, I'm been exposed here as a bit of a weirdo. And then Uncle Ben walks away, and Peter says, like, oh, no, sorry. Uncle Ben says, I'm his probation officer, which is quite funny. And then Peter says, when Uncle Ben goes away, Peter tells Gwen that his uncle's a pathological liar, which is quite funny as well. But then obviously the scene where Peter asks Gwen out, and how Emma Stone and Andrew work through that scene, is probably one of the best scenes in the entire film, in my opinion. What are your thoughts?
No, I do think that scene was pretty good. I mean, I agreed with everything you said there. Don't really have any more to add to that.
I just really love the awkwardness. I feel like they do the teenage romance really, really well. They definitely capture that spirit there.
I feel like Emma Stone doesn't do it as well as Andrew Garfield. And I feel like, in particular, it's probably because she looks older than Andrew Garfield, which can add to if you're playing a younger character, it's definitely going to detract from that. And in no means is that going to sort of detract from my overall rating on that, because she can't really fix that, right? She was cast in this film, and she can't really change that. If she's playing a young actor, it's not her fault. It's a bit biased if I was to base it on that. But I do feel like even though Andrew Garfield might have been older, I'm not sure. If he was older,
I think he probably is. Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like he played the sort of awkward teenager better.
Okay, that's interesting. I think they're both really good. I feel like without those two, this franchise would have just been so much worse. Yes, and in many ways it did anyway. But
it still did.
But I feel like the one major positive that this film does better than any other Spider-Man film is the relationship there. And obviously Gwen's a major part of both stories. And they really did nail that character. And that's something that I feel like this series can be proud of. What are your thoughts on the music video in this film? Obviously, Marc Webb, he's directed a few music videos. He's quite good at them, but we get probably like 3 minutes of this movie of a Coldplay song that's like dialed up
Mm-hmm.
to max volume, and where Peter's sort of like discovering his powers and, you know, gets the idea of web swinging. What were your thoughts on that scene? Because a lot of people hate on the fact that there's music videos, Coldplay music videos in these movies.
Minus the music, right? I did like the fact that we, you know, saw him make his web shooters, and then when he's kind of standing upside down on the tallest building in the city, and then he flips off the building. This is the scene you're talking about, right? This is the yeah. I do like how we kind of got him making this suit and putting it all together. I feel like we don't really see that in a lot of the other films, especially Tom Holland's franchise.
Yeah.
So, you know, it feels real that he is smart enough to make his own suit, because Tom Holland's character kind of feels kind of stupid. Like we don't really see the nerdy aspect of him in that film.
Yeah, this character is definitely smart,
But
and definitely
yeah,
portrays the fact that he is
you
smart.
can tell the
Yeah.
fact that he's smart enough to make the suit. So I really, really like that.
Yeah.
You know, the music is we didn't really need Coldplay in it.
Yeah.
But no, I do like also the fact that he's like walking behind the two kids who are talking about physics or whatever, momentum and velocity.
Yeah.
I think that was quite smart, because, you know, Peter Parker's a smart guy, but he's
Yeah.
still looking towards other people to get
Yeah.
inspiration for his suit. And, you know, he's
Mm.
switching through things, you know, spandex.
Yeah.
I do like the whole, you know, creating Spider-Man scene. I think that was quite good.
Yeah. Yeah. I really love that montage.
Yeah.
And then obviously that suit reveal is pretty awesome, and I love the music in there. But
Good old
one of my
Coldplay.
No, not Coldplay. It's the one where, you know, it's Becoming Spider-Man. That's the song that plays. You know, not Coldplay. No, that song's not good. But the music that happens when he jumps onto the building,
yeah. That one.
and you see the suit for the first time. That's good music there. Not the Coldplay.
Not the Coldplay one.
Yes. I do like that montage though. Two quick notes. One, Andrew Garfield is ripped. He looks like he's got powers. Tobey Maguire, he was fit in the first film. Like, you can tell that he did a bit of work.
Mm-hmm.
Second film, not so much. And in the third film, they had to CGI his chest because he didn't look muscular anymore. And that's all I'll say. I think that provides enough evidence. We see Andrew Garfield in a singlet at one stage, and he's super lean and he's super skinny.
Yeah.
But like, he's got a bit of muscle to him. Like, he looks like Spider-Man, doesn't he? At least in my
I
opinion.
do like how he looks really lean and skinny in the suit. Like it feels like he's I don't know, I feel like that's what Spider-Man should be, this awkward, skinny teenager who decides to become a superhero and fight the world and take down all these evil villains. I do like that. And I really, really like the second suit, because you can tell that he's like really skinny in it. You know, a lot of the other suits, Tobey Maguire looks really buff in the suit, and then Tom Holland looks really short.
Too small for the suit.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I feel like Tobey Maguire wouldn't have been able to fit into Garfield's suit.
Oh, definitely not.
Right, shall we touch on the car thief scene? I feel like this is a scene that is evidenced by Spider-Man fans as something that that the Amazing Spider-Man films did right, and that's make Spider-Man quippy, like, you know, quite humorous, and always saying stupid things to the criminals and just try and distract them. Obviously, we don't get a lot of humor in the Raimi films, but I was wondering, my favorite part is when the criminal pulls out a small knife.
My weakness. It's not small knives.
Small knives. He gets on his knees. And I also love when he's in the car and the criminal winds down the window and he's trying to climb out the window, and Spider-Man's like, oh, there you go.
You got it.
Come on, you can do it. You got it. Oh, there you go. It's good stuff.
I want to know how Spider-Man got into the car. How the hell did he get into the car?
I know. It's sort of like Batman. It's like Batman just like
He just
shows up.
appears there, right? And it's also
Yeah,
kind of
yeah,
like where, Batman kind of disappears when the character like turns around. It's like, what
yeah, yeah, yeah.
in particular? I don't know if you've seen this YouTube video, but there's this
Oh yes, I've seen that.
where it's like Batman, but you can see him running away.
Yes. Oh, that's so good. So good.
Oh, it's so good.
You just see him like running off in the distance, like
Yeah, yeah,
so good. It definitely takes out the dramatic level of the
exactly.
scene. Yes. All right. And another one of my favorite scenes in the entire film is the dinner table scene where Peter is at Gwen Stacy's household.
Mm-hmm.
This is a part of the movie where Peter isn't Spider-Man yet. He's wearing the fake, or he's wearing the Spider-Man costume, isn't he? But he's not saving people. He's still out to get Uncle Ben's killer, right? He's got a mission. He's a vigilante. And by the way, he's actually perching on a gargoyle at one stage. So major Batman vibes.
Major Batman vibes.
Yeah. So he's not a hero at this stage, right? He's not a hero. And I think Peter's sort of in denial as to, he sort of thinks he's a hero, but he sort of like thinks at the same time he's a bad person.
Mm.
But then like Captain Stacy just like he just hits him with facts and logic and like destroys Peter and like tells him that he isn't a hero. And Peter's sort of like, oh, maybe I'm not a hero.
He just
Like,
destroyed all of his confidence that he had.
Yeah, destroyed him with facts and logic. And there's some good burns there, man. There's some good burns going back between Peter and Captain Stacy when they're at the dinner table. Peter's like asking, Captain Stacy says, if I wanted the car thief off the street, then he would have been. And then Peter's like, so why wasn't he then?
Yeah.
And it's like, oof. And then Captain Stacy's like, it's called strategy. I'm sure you're aware of the term strategy. You probably learned about it in school. And like, major burns.
It kind of makes sense though as to why they would, keep him around to really get the big criminals. I mean, they need to keep the small ones to lure out the bigger ones. I think that's what he said.
Yeah, for sure. And then definitely like, trading hits there, And poor Gwen Stacy's just like, brought a new boyfriend home. And the first thing that he's done is start a fight with her dad.
That's not what you want.
It was a bit awkward, wasn't it,
Yeah.
for Gwen Stacy? But, she didn't seem to mind. What did you think about the fact that Peter just like reveals straight away the fact that he's Spider-Man? In the Raimi films, Peter's always like trying to keep it a secret that he's Spider-Man. He wants to tell Mary Jane, but he doesn't because he's a good person. Whereas this Peter, he's just like, he just tells us straight away. What did you think about that and how it sort of changed the dynamic of the film?
I do like how he revealed it, right? I think that was quite sweet. But, I mean, they've changed it up from the Raimi franchise, which it's fresh to change it up, and they should always be doing that with films. So, yeah, we see Spider-Man get revealed to Gwen Stacy quite early on. Well, not early on, but early on in the grand scheme of films, if there was going to be a third film. Thank God there wasn't. But no, I don't mind it. They've changed it up. Yeah, it's good that they did it.
Yeah, it definitely changes. It's something they've done differently.
Yeah.
That's for sure. So you got to give them credit for that because it does get, a bit abused for being the same story, but it's, a lot of different things in there. In terms of scenes that sort of rival, perhaps like the train scene in Spider-Man 2, those really iconic Spider-Man scenes. Did you think there were any scenes in this film that even sort of came close to Peter Parker saving the train and stopping the train scene? Any good scenes like that in this?
Nah.
In your opinion, anyway.
In terms of like saving the citizens, you mean, right?
No, just like awesome Spider-Man moments.
Awesome Spider-Man moments?
I guess sort of being like, saving the city,
Oh, I think I know what you want me to talk about. the crane swinging scene, right?
Well, yes, that's a really good scene.
That's a really, really good scene. And I do like how he kind of got this crane operator, gather all my
Yeah.
mates together. We're gonna help Spider-Man.
Yeah.
And they
Yeah.
all turn their cranes around 90 degrees to help him get to Oscorp Tower. I think that was quite fitting.
Mm.
No, I quite like that. How the community comes to help out Spider-Man because they realize that he is the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man and he's helping the city.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And obviously, like, because that crane operator, his son was saved by Spider-Man, which is a scene earlier in the film, and I think that
Wait,
scene's really good as well.
really?
Oh yeah,
Oh, I
man.
never
Oh, did you
touched
miss
up.
that
I
connection?
didn't touch
Oh,
up on that. Nah.
on the bridge, the first time
Yeah,
Peter
I
really
remember.
becomes
I remember the
Spider-Man.
kid and the dad. Yeah, but I never
Yeah, so
thought that the dad was the crane operator. Oh wow.
yeah, so Peter saves the kid and then obviously returns him to his father, and then the father's like, "Who are you?" You know, sort of like the Rise of Skywalker
Yeah, yeah.
moment. But it's done better because they don't know who this person is. They don't know what he is. Like, are you a good guy? Are you a bad guy? You know, who are you? And he says, "I'm Spider-Man."
Mm.
I'm like, God damn, yes you are. Um, but and then sort of Peter looks at his mask and realizes that there's more important things than finding Uncle Ben's killer. But so the dad of Jack, so Jack's the kid that gets saved.
Hmm.
The dad is the crane operator.
Mm.
So the dad sees Spider-Man on the TV and he's like, "Oh, that's the guy who saved my boy on the bridge. Let's help him out."
Mm.
So that's sort of the connection there, which I think is really well
Oh, that's
done.
good. Yeah, I never picked up on that because obviously there was so much going on between that scene and the final scene with the whole crane operator.
Yeah.
So I kind of forgot about it. But no,
Mm.
I really like that car saving scene as well. How
Yeah.
it felt like Andrew was directing it at that point, and I think you said Andrew directed some of the scenes in the Amazing Spider-Man 2 or
Mm.
suggested some of the ideas.
Yeah.
And this felt like an Andrew idea, right? He's
Mm.
wear the mask; it will give you power. He really knows
Yes.
how to
Yeah.
deal with kids, and he was like, I'm like you. I'm just an ordinary person. I think that was quite
Mm.
good. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I like the fact that he takes his mask off because obviously, we want Spider-Man to wear his mask when he's fighting crime because, he's got to protect his identity. But
Yeah.
when he takes his mask off, it allows Andrew to act.
Mm.
And, we see in the final fight when he's fighting the lizard, when the lizard has his tail around his throat and then he takes the mask off
Yeah.
and Andrew looks like he's going to
Yeah. He
explode.
looks so
Like,
red.
yeah. And it's like, that's so good. Like, I wish in The Amazing Spider-Man 2, in that final scene, I wish he somehow got his mask removed. Because I feel like, obviously he takes his mask off at the very end, but I feel like having Andrew, Andrew's a fantastic actor and he's proven that in these movies. And I feel like if he was given more of an opportunity to show that, it would have been better. But I feel like in this scene, it really works because Andrew just takes his mask off. And obviously there's the philosophical thing of putting the mask on makes you strong. And yeah, Andrew's really good with kids, isn't he?
Yeah.
Like inspiring kids. Because I feel like, that was sort of his mission
Yeah.
with these movies. From a philosophical standpoint. But I really love that scene. And obviously the crane scene is brilliant as well. But yes, Captain Stacy, I don't know if you picked up on this, but when Curt Connors is the lizard and Peter Parker is trying to tell Captain Stacy, Captain Stacy uses the same joke twice.
Really?
And it's like, he says like, "Do I look like the mayor of Tokyo to you?" And then Peter says something, and he's like, "Well, Peter, you just go back to the citizens of Tokyo." Like, it's like, okay, mate, you've used the first joke. You don't use the same joke. Like, it's such a dad thing to do. Like, am I right? Like, it's such a confident yet
Yeah.
sort of lame dad thing, like that Captain Stacy's doing here.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I felt like that was funny because it's something dads would do. Use the same joke twice, and it wasn't funny the first time. But I appreciate the fact that I don't know if you were relieved by this, but Captain Stacy actually checks to see whether Peter Parker is right about his crazy theory about a monster. A lot of the times in movies, we see protagonists, going to the police and being like, "You have to believe me.
Yeah.
There's this insane thing happening." The police like, "Oh, don't be stupid. Get out of here.
Yeah.
I'm not going to go check that." whereas Captain Stacy actually does check that, which is a nice change of pace, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I enjoyed that because obviously, I hate when, there are ignorant police officers being like, oh, there isn't a Godzilla monster. Don't worry, and then they say like, Voldemort isn't back. Don't worry, until they see Voldemort and they're like, oh,
damn, the kid was right.
That
How
kid
could the kid be right? It never happens.
Yes.
It only happens, in every goddamn franchise.
Yes. Great Stan Lee cameo in this, isn't there?
I was just going to talk about that. No, I really like the Stanley cameo and how, he's got the soft music playing and then the Lizard and Spider-Man are like going at it in the background and Stanley's like sorting out his books.
Yeah. Surely he would have felt those vibrations,
right?
But surely he doesn't mind.
Yeah,
he's just going about his business. He's seen it all before. He knows he'll be all right. He'll be in the next film. I've already spoken about Gwen being a bit of a badass. Visuals are great. There are a lot of money shots of Spider-Man swinging, isn't there? Like, the slow motion shots where you just have to be like, oh, look how good this CGI is and look how good those visuals are.
I really like the swinging in these films. I think it's some of the best swinging we've ever seen in Spider-Man. And I really hate the swinging in Sam Raimi's franchise because what Sam Raimi does is he locks the camera onto Spider-Man. So when Spider-Man's swinging, the whole of the background, the whole of New York City is just like a blur, and it's just like so quick going past. So you're focused on Spider-Man, and the camera's like locked on him, so it doesn't look good. And keep in mind it is 2000, so I'm not going to hate on it too much. But yeah, I really feel like the swinging in this film combined CGI and practical so well that it looks like it's realistic, like it's just like just torn straight out of real life. Like I can't really find any faults with it.
Yeah, and I feel like the MCU sort of goes a bit too over the top with the CGI.
I feel like it's too cartoony. Like they still nail the whole swinging, but they don't do it as well as the Amazing Spider-Man films.
Well, glad to hear that. Yeah, and obviously the crane scene, I think it's bloody phenomenal. I really like it. I think it is a similar level of awesomeness to that Spider-Man 2 train scene. But before that, when Spider-Man's fighting Captain Stacy, I think that's a really good scene too. When the cops sort of they stun Spider-Man and they've got him in a circle and they take his mask off.
Yeah. That was really clever. That was some very clever fight choreography, and how he kept his head down when he was, shooting them with the webs. I think that was quite clever.
Yes, and obviously, Captain Stacy's a highlight for me. That's for sure. And especially when he comes in with the shotgun, boss man with a shotgun. Andrew's being strangled by the lizard, and the lizard is like, "Oh, poor Peter Parker, all alone." And then Captain Stacy's like, "He's not alone."
Yeah.
Bang.
Yeah.
Oh, brilliant! Love me some Captain Stacy with a shotgun.
Captain Stacy with a shotgun is deadly.
So, what did you think about the final fight? And obviously, we have the typical, the bad guys put a serum in a tower. I think it's the exact same in Venom, actually. There's, bad guy has, some sort of chemical that he's wanting to explode over the whole world. So they got to fight on the tower, and the tower's going to break, and they've got 5, 4, 3, 2.
Yeah, I don't know if you've seen Rampage, which was released a few years ago now. I think it was 2018, which is a Dwayne The Rock Johnson film. It was like the exact same premise. There's like these massive creatures climb a tower, and they get attracted to some sort of beacon on the tallest point in the tower, and then some serum needs to go in it to kill the whole the beacon. Like it's the exact same thing. It's been torn out of that. It's pretty generic. And one thing that really annoyed me, which annoys me in a lot of films, why is there always like the longest time on the detonator? Like, can't they make like the detonation 15 seconds and then the lizard jumps off the building? Like, it's 2 minutes. Why is the detonator 2 minutes? I don't understand.
It's funny, and it really annoys me because Spider-Man, he gets there and he's got like 10 seconds to spare, and then he just like doesn't do anything for like 5
I
seconds.
saw that. I
He's
saw
like,
that.
he's
Yeah.
got the serum. I'm like, what are you
He's just like
doing?
looking
Like,
at the serum. Like he's like, what do I do?
yeah, is he like contemplating like, oh, maybe New York would be better off if they were all turned into lizards? Like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Like, just change it. And because then he waits, and then it goes like 3, 2, and then he does
Yeah.
it. Like, I don't know. We sort of see the same thing.
It's like they
Captain
didn't
America
really
with the
add up
Hulk.
like the countdown properly, and like, oh damn, we need a few extra
Yeah,
seconds. We need a few extra seconds. So when he puts it in, it's like, did he put it in correctly? Is the serum going to go off, or is the whole world going to turn
yeah,
into lizards? Like,
yeah.
it's like, and Marc Webb was like, damn, we need more time.
Yeah, they're like, production team, we need 5 seconds from somewhere. What do we do?
Look,
Um,
Andrew Garfield can look at the serum. Okay,
yes,
that's the best idea you could come up with. Let's go
yes,
with
make
that.
him do it for 5 seconds. Yes, that'll work. Put it in the film. Oh, and take out those good those good scenes of Curt Connors and his backstory.
We
Get rid of
don't
those.
need
Put
that.
extra 5 seconds in there. We need that extra 5 seconds, people.
Yeah.
Yes, some dicey production choices made in this film. That is for sure. I really like the finale of this film and sort of like the consequences of it. Obviously, Captain Stacy himself has a bit of an arc. You know, he started off thinking that Spider-Man was a menace.
Yeah.
And he wanted him
You
behind
sound like
bars.
Jane Jonas.
He's a menace.
Spider-Man is
I
a
want
menace.
Spider-Man.
Uh,
He was a hero. I just couldn't see it.
yeah.
But then by the end, he's sort of like, you know, this city needs you, and then he dies. But before he dies, he says the most important thing I think in the entire franchise of these two movies,
Yeah.
and that is, you know, the promise of stay away from Gwen. And I think he actually has a right to say that. I mean, the man is dying.
Exactly,
He
right?
has a dying wish. I feel like that dying wish should be obeyed. Like, what are your thoughts?
No, yeah, like, and then towards the end of the film, it's obviously
I hate that.
we see he's like, the best promise is one you can't keep, or something like
Mm.
that.
Yeah.
Peter Parker says that to Gwen Stacy, and then Gwen Stacy smiles, and we cut the film there.
Mhm.
It's kind of like, why aren't you honoring this dying man's
Yeah.
wish, or this dead man's wish rather? You kind of just, you know, why would you do that? Like, it just seems so dishonorable to do that. Yeah.
But then, you know, obviously we've seen like Peter has like obviously fallen in love with Gwen, so like it is a tough decision to make, sure, but like the man is dying, and he nodded his head, so he was like, you know, keep away from Gwen. Can you promise me that? And like Peter, like, he nods,
Yeah.
and then Captain Stacy sees this, and then he dies, and then he closes his eyes and he dies, and
You know,
I feel like it should have just been left.
you know what would
that
have been
way.
better if Captain Stacy said, please take care of Gwen for me. If he said that,
Yeah,
because then it would have tied in with, you know, Gwen Stacy coming back in the second film for the love interest, like, and then we don't have the whole issue of you know, Peter Parker just hating on a dead man's wish. Like,
yeah.
in a way, they should have just done that. Like,
Yeah, I feel like simple fix for me. If I could do anything, I would. So obviously Peter has accepted the promise, and then he breaks up with Gwen, and then Aunt May sort of says, "Oh, did you ask her out?" And then he said, "No, I didn't. She's I'm not good enough for her." And she's like, "Peter Parker, if there's anything you are, it's good." And then we get Ben's voicemail, and it's a bit uplifting. You know, you owe the world your gifts, Peter, and you know you're my hero. And then I feel like you should have just ended the film there and gone into the final swing and then finished the film.
yeah,
Because then you can still pick up where you left off with The Amazing Spider-Man 2, with Peter grappling with that decision, and you know, maybe he's gone back to Gwen and he feels guilty about it, and then obviously, you know, the events of Spider-Man, The Amazing Spider-Man 2. But I feel like it rubs me the wrong way in that scene where the teacher says, "Don't make promises you can't keep," and then he's like, but those are the best kind.
Mm.
It doesn't work for me.
It's a
It's
bit
always seemed disrespectful.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, they do continue with it, but obviously in the Amazing Spider-Man 2, Peter's got quite a bit of grief because of his decision. You know, he's seeing Captain Stacy as a ghost. You know, he's feeling guilty.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you remember that of the Amazing Spider-Man 2, but he sees like Captain Stacy like staring at him,
Nah, I don't
and
remember
he
that.
sees so at various times throughout the Amazing Spider-Man 2, he sees like Captain Stacy's figure like standing there looking at him as he sort of makes decisions that will eventually lead to what happens to Gwen at the end of the film. So there's definitely a bit of grief there. I'm glad they explored that in the second film, because I feel like that promise sort of does define these two movies,
Mm-hmm.
but it rubs me the wrong way in this film, to be honest.
Yeah.
And it seems like it does to you as well.
Yeah. I don't really understand why they went with that decision. It just kind of seems like bad writing on Sony's
Yeah.
behalf there. Yeah.
No, it's like, yeah, I mean, like it's teenager love. Like he's a teenager, he's gonna make stupid decisions. So like, sure, but I mean, I really would have just taken out that scene, you know,
Yeah.
where he goes back on the promise, and then just make that voicemail extra uplifting. Because I don't know, you know how Ben leaves a voicemail before he dies, right? And Peter tries to listen to it, but he can't.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the end of the film, he listens to it. The exact same thing happens in The Amazing Spider-Man 2. So I think it must be a Marc Webb trademark, because in The Amazing Spider-Man 2, Peter misses Gwen's
Yeah,
speech,
and then he
watches Gwen's speech at the end.
yeah, and then is
So it's
that
just
when he goes to like fight Rhino?
yeah. So like we always get like a voicemail or a speech at the start of the film that Peter can't see for whatever reason.
Yeah.
And then it somehow foreshadows the events of the film. And then at the end, it's going to give you a nice, meaningful message to go with that final swing. So I just wanted to note that, because it's a bit of a Marc Webb trademark. I feel like it does work. It's really nice voicemail, a bit on the nose, a bit like Uncle Ben knew what was going to happen. Quickly before we wrap up, did you have an issue with the fact that one moment Peter wants to find Ben's killer and then the next he just doesn't?
Yeah, honestly, like I was watching the film, right, and I was like, hold up, is he actually gonna find like Uncle Ben's killer? Like, what happened with that? Like, did he just forget about it, or like?
The thing, I think you can almost excuse it two ways, right? So after he saves Jack, so after, you know, he saves the child, there's a shot where Peter is looking at his mask, and I feel like in that scene he's sort of deciding where his priorities lie. Like, is he going to go after Ben's killer, or is he going to be Spider-Man? And he ultimately chooses to be Spider-Man. And then also, Ben's voicemail actually foreshadows that sometimes you need to let things go, and that, you know, sometimes it doesn't work out, and stuff like that. So he sort of tells Peter to let it go. So, but I feel like, you know, it needed a bit more clarification there, because I feel like that's quite a fair criticism, to be like, one moment he's searching for Ben's killer and the next he's just not.
Yeah.
And he doesn't in the second film either.
Yeah, I didn't really pick up on that, but if that was the case, then yeah, it's kind of like a hidden meaning in a way.
Yeah. Yeah, certainly have to look for it. Final swing. I don't know. Do you want to touch on anything else?
Yeah, I actually wanted to touch on the end credit scene.
Oh, okay. So, final swing for me is magical.
Yeah.
It's great music, great visuals. I love when he falls down in slow motion, and we get the helicopter whirring in the background. Awesome stuff. Great visuals, great music. Nice ending. Reminds me a lot of Batman Begins, actually. But yeah, so what did you want to touch on with the post credits? It's like a MCU ripoff. They're trying to do MCU films, aren't they? You can tell Sony is trying to set up their own universe.
Yeah.
Idiots. What were your thoughts?
See, I never actually watched the end credit scene, because I obviously, at this age, if I was watching the film, I can't remember if I watched it, but I never knew that there was such thing as an end credit scene. So I think you've brought it up before. I can't remember, but I think you've spoken about it before sometime. Um, so I've watched the scene before, but I watched it again and I searched it up to see what was the deal with it. Um, so yeah, it's obviously the lizard is in prison, and then we see this dark sort of silhouette approach him.
Mm.
And I searched it up, and I can't remember who it was, but
It's something fierce, Alexander Fierce or
yeah,
something.
essentially he's like the Nick Fury of like
The
the
bad
bad
guys, yeah.
guys, right? Like he's setting up this Sinister Six in a way, actually. Um,
Mm.
and yeah, and you can tell that they were going for a Sinister Six because we have um, Green Goblin, Electro, Rhino, the Lizard. So they were definitely going for the Sinister Six in the third film if there was to be one.
Mm.
Which I'm glad they didn't do it because I don't like any of the villains, so it would have been
They wouldn't
terrible.
have been able to pull it off. I mean, they couldn't pull off 2 villains in a movie. They
Yeah,
couldn't
yeah.
pull off 6. Can you imagine?
No, they couldn't.
Um,
And then obviously in the second movie we see the whole all of the the villain suits when I can't was it
yeah.
Norman Osborn that was walking through it? I can't remember.
No, that was the guy. That was the fierce
That was the
guy.
fierce
Yeah.
guy. Okay, yeah, he's walking
Yeah.
past all of the suits and then it's clear they were setting up the Sinister Six in
Yeah.
this end credit scene, and then in the next end credit scene it's just they had a plan going for it,
Yeah.
but the villains aren't their strong suit, so they
Mm.
probably shouldn't have gone for it.
Yeah, it's like you can't manufacture a universe. You just have to make a good movie and then make another good movie and then somehow tie them all together. It's just you can't like it's clear from day one they wanted to do an MCU Spidey universe
Yeah.
and it just wasn't. You can't do that. It's like with DC, they tried to manufacture a universe there by having Batman v Superman be the first film with Batman in it. Like, are you joking? Like, it just,
I
and
hated
then
that
that
film.
led into Justice League. It was so bad. So
God.
it
Somebody
just
should
shows.
save like the DCE.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
And I'm telling you now,
Fingers
it's going to be
crossed.
James Gunn with the Suicide Squad.
That does look pretty good. I'm looking forward to that. That's for sure.
Mm.
Music segment. So the 2 songs going in the rewatch playlist this week are "Becoming Spider-Man," which plays when Peter becomes Spider-Man. Surprise, surprise.
Mhm.
When he gets the suit and we get the suit reveal. I really love that song. I think the music in this film is great. Do you agree?
Yeah, I liked it. I really like the Amazing Spider-Man 2's music more. Um, kind of biased because it is Hans Zimmer. But when I was watching it, it complemented it well. Nothing really stood out to me there. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and obviously, like James Horner orchestrated the music, wrote the music. Unfortunately, he passed away. I think he passed away in a car accident, which is
Oh,
so
wow.
tragic. And this is one of the he did the music for movies like Titanic, and a bunch of other like really high-ranking, really brilliant films. And obviously, that meant that he couldn't come back for the second film. So James Horner, he did the music for Apollo 13, and also did the music for Braveheart.
Okay.
People also search for Hans Zimmer and John Williams. So he was up there.
Yeah.
He was one of the one of the leading composers.
For films.
So yeah,
Yeah.
tragic that he was taken. But the music in this I think is really good, but I feel like you can definitely tell that Hans Zimmer did the second one, just because there's it's just a different vibe to it, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
Um,
It's more epic in
yeah,
the second film.
yeah, for sure. Definitely trying to be more Avengers-like.
Mm.
But yeah, so "Saving New York" is the second track that's going in from James Horner. That's obviously the song that plays during the crane scene, which is one of the best scenes in the film, I
Yeah,
think.
definitely.
So yeah, Jayden, let us know your final thoughts, and then you can give us your rating, and we'll wrap it up.
You know what? Let's switch it up. You go
Oh, you want me to
first.
go first?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay. He wants validation, ladies and gentlemen. He doesn't want to come out on a limb and support this film without me coming out there as well. Okay. There are some scenes in this film that I genuinely think are some of the best Spider-Man scenes ever.
Mhm.
And I feel like there are elements of this film particularly the relationship, particularly the visuals, and the story of Peter Parker and the focus on Peter Parker, that I think outdo a lot of the other films. I think in terms of, ranking them, never mind Spider-Verse, because obviously it's the best one. But I feel like this is certainly up there in the conversation, at least top 3, at least. I feel like this is better than any of the Iron Man Jr. movies, and I feel like this is also better than, obviously better than Spider-Man 3. I feel like this is a really, really good film. I feel like there are writing issues, and it's clear that Sony interfered a bit with this film.
Yeah.
They took some things out that they probably should have left in, and they added some things that they probably should have taken out.
Yeah.
There are some loose ends, but in terms of the cast, I really love everyone's performance. I really love all of the characters. I love the music in the film. I love the visuals in the film. And I have a really fun time watching this film. So for me, it was a question of whether it's going to be high B tier or low A tier, because there are problems with the film. And even though I love this film so much, I have to recognize there are problems.
Yeah.
So that is going to hold it down. But I still think the essence of this film, so Peter Parker, Gwen Stacy, Uncle Ben, Aunt May, Captain Stacy, are all brilliant. And I feel like this film almost tells a better Peter Parker story than Raimi films 1 and 2. So I feel like this film is just going to creep on to the A category, but it's going to be an A minus. And I really had to grapple with this film because obviously I do have a bit of a bias, so I admit that. And I feel like I was almost going to give it a B plus, but talking about all of the good things, I feel like there's more good than bad in this film, and this is a film that I definitely come back to from time to time, and I enjoy it just as much. Lizard is a problem, right?
Yeah.
But I feel like everything else is so good that it's able to haul it up there. Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone have got this A minus tier on their shoulders. They're pushing it
Carrying
up.
the film.
Pushing it up. Yes. As along with mine, Sheen as well. I love his performance. So yeah, obviously I'm a big fan of this series. But I really tried not to let my love for the film affect the rating. It obviously has, there's no such thing as an objective rating, but it's going to be an A minus for me. I'd recommend, if someone was I want to watch a Spider-Man film, I'd say watch this one. I'd either say watch this one or Raimi #1. I wouldn't recommend Raimi #2, to be fair. I'd recommend
That's interesting.
either The Amazing Spider-Man or the first Spider-Man. And obviously, I think the acting is better in this film. The visuals are better. So I'd probably recommend this one.
Okay.
But what are your thoughts, my friend?
Look, overall, I think this was a fun film to watch, right? And, it went for 2 hours and 16 minutes, but at the same time, it didn't feel like it went for that long. There are several issues with this film that I had, and I've already touched on them. The villains are terrible. It could have been shorter. Certain things just detract from this film, and the whole the story and the plot of the lizard, how he's trying to turn everyone into lizards. Like, it's just like,
yeah, it is pretty stupid.
why?
Isn't
like
it?
It's boring. It was a letdown, and the villain felt kind of mundane in a way. And like I said before, Sony just keeps doing this.
Yeah.
They need to learn from it. When will they ever learn from it? We don't know. Yeah, so the music in this film, I think it's pretty good as well. I think James Horner did a great job with it. Like I said before, I do like the second film more, but I don't have any issue with the music in this film. I think it complemented it nice. Nothing really stood out to me, though.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think my favorite part of the film in particular was all of the scenes we see with Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone. I think their chemistry worked fantastically. Probably some of the best relationships we've seen on screen with Spider-Man. It adds that element of realism to it, and how they're actually teenagers, even though they look so old. They pull it off pretty well. What else? Let me see. Actually, really liked Uncle Ben and Aunt May in this film as well, and how they played this married couple. It feels like they've been a married couple for so long, not just put together on screen and work it out. It feels like they're real. There's so much realism in this film, which is really good at there's realistic consequences. It's not a cartoony film; it's a dark film. It's probably some of the darkest Spider-Man films I've ever seen. And I like that. I like how they're going for this dark undertone with the Amazing Spider-Man films. Like I said, the film could have been shorter in the runtime. But yeah, I was jumping back and forth with my rating. And I was trying to give some space for the Raimi films, because in a way I do feel like they are better, and in another way I also really like Tom Holland's films. Not so much the second one. I'm a fan of the first one though. I quite like Homecoming. So I was trying to give some room for other films to jump in there and possibly have a higher rating. And then I was also comparing it to previous ratings that we've done on the podcast. So I think a B- is fitting of this.
Oh,
and if you were wondering what I was going to originally rate it, was at a B tier, but I have a lot of issues with this film, so I can't justify rating it a B, because I don't know. I feel like a B is still a really, really good rating, but a B- is more appropriate for this film.
okay. Yeah, I sort of, with the ratings, I try and refer to some of the other films, but I feel like, it's hard to compare like a Spider-Man film with like a Kingsman film. It's like, yeah. So, but that's for me anyway. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like we talked more positively than negatively,
But
but
it's
there
not
are
a negative rating, because a negative rating is lower than a C. So that's going
yeah,
to be more negative than positive. A C is like a
yeah,
pass, right? So if you do any worse than that, you've got more worse stuff than you've got better stuff. Anything up
yeah.
from a C, you're going to have more better stuff than worse stuff. So a B-
Mm.
in scale is actually like 3 jumps above a pass. So it's still good.
Yeah. I feel like I'm really interested to hear, perhaps when we do the Raimi films and the Tom Holland films, what you think of those,
Mhm.
because yeah, I would place this in the top 3 Spider-Man movies, for a variety of reasons. So I'm looking forward to the discussion, if we talk about the Raimi films and Tom Holland's films, because yeah, they're definitely, you know, every film brings a different positive and a different negative. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting chat.
Yeah.
But yeah, happy to leave that there for today. It was fun talking about this. Obviously, one of my favorite movies. So take that into account with my rating. But obviously, there's no such thing as an objective rating, is there? So
No.
thank you for listening to this episode of the Rewatch podcast. If you'd like to follow us on Instagram, you can do so at the Rewatch Pod. If you'd like to subscribe to the YouTube channel, just search the Rewatch on YouTube. Any idea for the next episode, Jayden?
God, don't do this to me again.
We're on holidays now, so we can watch as many movies as we
Look,
like.
we're not going to announce it now, because we're going to end up changing it. So I'm not going to say it.
Yes, fair
Yeah.
enough. He's playing his cards close to his chest now, guys.
Call me Uncle Ben.
All right. On that note, thank you for listening. Bye for
See
now.
ya.